meeting of the Audit and Risk Committee of 14 March 2024. I should begin by noting that we meet on the lands of the Kaurna people and that we respect their culture and traditions, past, present and future. I'm also required to tell you that this public meeting will be recorded and published to Council's website, on Council's website, approximately 48 hours after the conclusion of the meeting, and will remain on Council's website. And then there's a redacted thing, so I presume that means in perpetuity. Audio and vision of any persons making a deputation of vision of persons present in the gallery will be captured in the recording. My first job is to officially declare the meeting open, to welcome members and staff to the meeting, to seek agenda item 2 is to seek confirmation of the minutes. Now, I always get this wrong. We put it to the vote first, and then we have the discussion. Someone moves it first, and then we have the discussion.
You can have questions at any time.
Yeah.
And that may change what they put to the motion, but then you get a mover,
yeah,
a seconder, and then debate.
Okay. So before I seek a mover and a seconder, are there any questions about the minutes? No. Will someone like to move that the minutes be adopted?
Happy to move both sets of minutes.
Thanks, Councillor Pritchard. A seconder?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Yeah. Thank you. Paul, is there any discussion on the minutes? No. Okay. All those in favour? Yep. Carried. Agenda item 3 is adjourned business. Agenda item 4 is the chairperson's report, which I have not furnished for this meeting. But I will be for the next one. Agenda item 5 is presentations, which are nil, deputations, which are nil. So that brings us to report of officers. And the first of those is 7.1, the Internal Audit Report, legislative compliance with the Planning, Development and Infrastructure Act. Now, Nicole, did you want to say anything?
Through the chair, Nicole's currently on leave competing in a karate tournament. A karate tournament. So I have Jane Gordon next to me, who's the acting team leader, but I'm happy to introduce the report. And this report provides the outcomes of the internal audit into the compliance with the Planning, Development and Infrastructure Act. We have KPMG here to talk to the findings, and we have staff here from the Planning and Development Department to answer questions as well. Thank you.
Okay.
Good afternoon. Through the chair, happy to provide an overview of the report and then open up to questions. If I can take the committee's attention to page 4 of our report, which is page 16 of the papers. Just to frame this audit, it was quite timely and topical to look at the application of the PDI Act for the council, just given its newness and seeing how the council's adapting to and governing the requirements of that act. Overall, it's a very positive report. I think we found there was a lot of good foundational governance elements in place, and the opportunities to improve and the findings really do relate to just driving better consistency and discipline in process, and also looking for opportunities to streamline things. But I will hand over to Heather who led the field work on this one, and she can go through a bit more of the positive context of this and then talk to some of the findings, and then we can open up to any questions.
Thanks, Eric. Through the chair, we'll keep it brief. I think overall, just recognizing that the results of the audit were very positive. So we have done this review for other councils, and just like to recognize that the council, Renee and the planning team, has a very good system and process, internal controls in terms of the frameworks and the guidance in place. I think specifically what we saw in terms of the policy, the procedure, the checklist provided a very useful framework for going forward the new act. There's a number of new requirements under the significant change in the legislation, a number of practice codes and directions that can be quite a process to navigate through for the team, but there's a clear framework and great guidance and support from the team and a very robust process in place. I think the significant development forum as well, so weekly significant forum held to discuss more substantial developments, as well as a very good governance process in terms of having that forum in terms of talking through some of the more complicated developments as well. Across the review, there was one matter, one performance improvement opportunity. I take the committee's attention just to the moderate rated finding. And I think it's to be recognized that under the new legislation, there's quite specific mandated timeframes in which applications and some of the inspections are to be done within. When we undertook our review, it was done at a point in time, and what we saw through the sample of 6 applications is that 2 of those were done outside of those timeframes. Don't want to be too harsh, because there was one that was just outside by 1 day, and one application that was assessed a bit longer than that. Additionally, what we saw through some of the internal reporting is that there's a percentage of some of those applications that consistently saw a bit of a trend in terms of the increase in the percentage that were at a time. And working with the team, we understand that that was due to a resourcing challenge at that point in time. And I think through the discussions and just the anecdotally, the conversations we've had with other councils, it's a hard skill set to recruit for and to retain within any council. So I understand that there was very much a focus on recruiting and retaining staff in that area that should look to address the issue and the root cause of some of those timeframes going out. And going forward, we would strongly would think that with that additional resourcing, the residual risk rating or risk to the council would be significantly reduced. But overall, very positive outcome in terms of what we've seen in comparison to other councils, and overall, but it's a very strong outcome of the audit from the team. But happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
I guess got a few. Thank you for the feedback around the relationship to other councils. I guess statistically, 2 out of 6, and noting one of those is missed by 1 day. And then some of the internal findings on page 22, which is team report, has some other planning consents where there's a significant, a percentage greater than between 13 and 70% that were out of time, and some other items. I guess what I'm looking for is some comfort around those numbers. It seemed like the risk was around the risk of having a deemed consent, but is there another issue here in the fact that we're not getting items approved in time? And is that a risk in other ways outside of just deemed consent?
Chair,
Hi.
am I okay to answer? Renee Mitchell, Director of Planning. Thank you. So the risk associated with out of time, a lot of those are because we're trying to negotiate a better outcome. And so there is a known time frame with applicants that we actually have gone out of time. And so it's sort of an agreement that we are looking towards and negotiating towards an outcome, rather than being forced to make a decision, which would be a refusal, and then we negotiate that in the court, which is more expensive for both parties. The deemed consent matters. We assess between 3,500 4,000 DAs a year. I think we've had a total of 6 deemed consents over 3 years. So I think it was just sheer coincidence that 2 of the 6 that were sampled came up. And again, most of those are because we are trying to negotiate a better outcome. Sometimes it's strategic and it's deliberate to get us into the court scenario. So we actually do get a formal negotiating opportunity where we're having troubles with the applicant. Yeah.
Thanks, Renee. Any other questions?
I guess just one more. This is around the checklist compliance. I think it was just some recommendations around inconsistencies on the checklist completions, and what the steps are in terms of improving that going forward.
Through the chair, we've had a significant turnover of staff in the last 18 months. So a lot of that inconsistency is due to training up staff and getting new staff used to our systems, the way we do things. That has improved and settled quite significantly in recent months. Yeah.
Just one, right, through the chair. Yeah. Can I just interrogate that response in relation to the deemed consent, Renee? Do I understand correctly that all of those that you referred to, or at least in this audit, we knew we were going over time? Because my concern is, and I appreciate trying to negotiate a better outcome, sure, but you can't negotiate an extension of time under the Act. So I'm a little bit concerned that that might be an unintended consequence of trying to do the right thing, and that we're then in a position where, and I haven't got it in front of me, but obviously there's some aspects to this that make it less favourable to us at that point. So, we're choosing our pain. Like, is this a strategic, intentional outcome, even if it's technically reducing our capacity to manage this well? I'm just, the administrative lawyer in me is incredibly uncomfortable about allowing a deemed consent and being okay with that. There must be a better way, but maybe I'm not aware of something.
Through the chair, thank you for the question. Fair question as well. Some of it is very well known to us, and I imagine that 2 or 3 of them may have been unintended, hence the 1 day out of time sort of thing. We hadn't quite made it. So a bit of a combination of both. Some of it.
I think that's one part that's people appreciate that deemed consent actually reduces that.
Oh, absolutely. And as I'm sure you're aware, we have a clock ticking that sits there in their face. They know exactly how much time they've got left, so they're well aware.
They're often refusal that gave you scope to negotiate.
Sometimes that is the much better approach. Sometimes, yes, depends how close we are to an outcome. Yeah, but I do appreciate what you're saying from a legal perspective. Absolutely.
Just a quick one on page 23, if I can. Development applications, there's a third dot point. Just some clarification. Looks like there's an observation being made, and this might be my interpretation of it, that we haven't been or weren't documenting reasons for certain decisions that were being made. Is that fair? And if that's the case, is that an issue, or is that something we're able to address?
Yes, through the chair, Matthew Lawrence, Manager of Development Services. We have updated our response to this. So we have a standard template for assessment notes for planning officers, and that is in our new corporate record system. For each application, they download the latest version of those assessment notes. So there's no inconsistency, or there should be no longer any inconsistencies in assessment.
Okay.
Yeah, one of those discussions already occurred on time frames, so what I say. Fundamentally, the change to the PDI Act and the requirements, so that actually assisted council. I noticed a comment from the report, so it's designed to simplify and make things easier. Has it?
Thank you for the question through the chair. In some respects, yes, it has simplified the process, and in others, no. And it depends which side of the fence that you sit on as well. So what we found, which I think is a different experience than other councils, is that we ended up with a much more streamlined development support team. And we made, I think it was 4 positions redundant as a result of the new online planning system. So the online planning portal has been an absolute game changer for this state and for the system. So there's absolutely all positives with that. There have been so-called simplifications that have come through that have been very frustrating for both applicants and council. And if needed, Matthew, you can comment on that. But one of the other concerns is that I just referenced the clock ticking. It is literally a clock that sits there, and the pressure that puts on individual officers is there all the time. That seems to be the emphasis of this system, is the time.
So, which is good because generally, as you know, planning staff are hard to get. I think the sector's cannibalising itself to try and get what is available. So the fact that it has helped to streamline is a positive because it does actually then reduce the risks down from council for potentially making mistakes or requiring more people that can actually recruit. So from that, it's a positive.
Thanks. Just
one follow-up question from that. Am I sensing there are people gaming that system, the clock? Is that a fair question? Like, do you get that sense?
Through the chair, the deemed consent process did not exist under previous legislation, and to some extent that is the gaming of the system, rather than working with us directly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking from a risk perspective rather than a particular item. Is this something that we're kind of tuning to, because it seems to be a new risk that's emerging in that space? Sorry, did that come out? Yep.
One of the primary concerns that most councils, if not all councils and the community have, is the appeal rights of third parties. That's a significant concern for us. And that's I guess seen as the community involvement in the development assessment process has been removed. I think that's probably one of the biggest concerns that we see. Yeah.
That sort of anticipates my question. Have we found ourselves over the audit period in the ERD court? If so, how many times? If not, then should that information be in the audit report? Even if the answer is no.
Through the chair, to the chair, the exact number of cases in the ERD court, I can't tell you off the top of my head, but what we saw was a reduction in the number of times we had appeals in the ERD court. Firstly, as a result of the removal of appeal rights. We are seeing a little uptick in applicants undertaking appeals against the decision as the industry is learning how the new legislation is working.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, I'm not necessarily saying being in the ARD court's a bad thing. You could argue if you're not in there every now and again, you'll probably, give you in too easily. So my interest is really as a measure that, year on year, whether it should be in the audit report, just a number of actions or something, so we can see some sort of trend line, notwithstanding the obvious impact of changes of legislation.
We can certainly make that improvement and divide it into both the enforcement and appeals for planning decisions.
Thank you. And my other question is, we're being asked to, as recommendation number 3, that the implementation of the agreed audit actions will be monitored and reported to the committee on a quarterly basis. So that implies a certain process. That implies that we get the report, you guys decide on what the actions will be, and that you bring it to us, and our role is limited to monitoring what you decided in advance of this meeting. I'm not being critical, I'm just trying to understand the process. Is that the process?
Through the chair, that is the process. So once the management have agreed to the action items, we log them into our monitoring system and we provide the internal audit updates quarterly to the meeting, which gives detail about actions that are outstanding and actions that have been completed.
So our views on the actions are not welcome. That's all decided before it comes here.
The actions that are contained after an audit are management agreed actions.
Okay, thank you. If there are any further questions? So we're being asked to receive and note the report and provide the following feedback and comments. I suppose we need to decide, in order to complete this recommendation, whether there is any feedback and comments that we wish to provide. Can I suggest we take note of the indication that the information on ERD court actions be included in future reports? Yeah. Is there anything else?
Did you want to put anything in there about what KPMG was saying was that the audit was generally
Yeah,
of a good standard?
I'm in the hands of the committee, but
Yeah,
my own view is yes.
yeah, just to provide some assurance to the elected members when it comes to the council, that's all.
So, Councillor Yeomans, perhaps you could move the motion here and on the basis of adding that comment.
Yeah, I'll ask the KPMG to put those words down.
Yeah.
If you wanted to give an overview of how you felt the standard of the results of the audit, that sort of initial sentence was, I thought that's worth adding, I think, yeah.
No worries. I'm happy to. So overall, the results were very positive and indicative of a strong internal process and system in place to manage that the new legislation, implementation of the new legislation.
You didn't see my lips move.
So what about a motion that goes like this?
I feel very positive.
Oh, are you okay, or do you want me to do the?
No, you do what you're going to do, yeah.
So it says the following feedback and comments that the ARC noted the positive and favourable report from the auditors and requested that future reports include information on actions taken in the ERD court. Okay. And noted that future reports would include information on actions taken in the ERD court. So, Council, do you want to propose move that? Yes, please. Well, can you move both?
Yes.
Yeah, he can, if you so minded, you could perhaps move both. Save us the trouble.
One.
Yes, I'm happy to move that.
Yeah, seconded. Oh, thank you, Paul. All those in favour? Right, thank you. Thanks, guys. Brings us to agenda item 7.3. 7.2, the internal audit quarterly update. Does anyone want to speak to this?
Through the chair, or happy for you to skip it, but that's okay. This report provides the update on the activities of the internal audit function since our last report to the December meeting. Happy to take as read, and happy to take questions.
Perhaps I could just introduce the questioning by observing that this is one of those reports that we get every meeting. It is just an update of the previous report. It might be that this is handled most efficiently, just by exception, and to use your words, taken as read. With that introduction, are there any questions?
Yes.
Four slide, tells you there, I can try and understand the 2 lines and all that, and it's like the same thing but with different numbers. Sorry.
Page 32, the schedule table there's 2 lines with different numbers, and I'm trying to figure out what I'm missing because
Through
different
the
numbers.
chair, you're referring to
summary of ordered actions.
okay.
Sorry, yes.
Yeah, so there is a bit of a difference. So
Yes.
the number of actions is when we have an internal audit and we put an action into our system, there may be several other sub actions that need to happen from that. So the number of actions is the head action, and
Yes.
the number of tasks is the task that's.
I've just
underneath that.
noticed the word that's different, and I'm like, that's the difference. Okay, that makes more sense.
One of those actions.
Correct, that's correct, yes.
Ask.
Any other questions? Keep going.
On page 32, it just notes that there's 5 of the 8 outstanding actions. We're waiting for that sort of one council implementation. So we're still looking at that for March 24.
Through the chair, the latest and greatest date on the go live of project 3 is the 15th of April.
Okay. And on page, if I just keep asking a couple more questions, that's right. Page 64, there's mention there that in financial delegation, I just get that of 400 staff have financial delegation, which is half the staff. Is that right? Am I reading that right?
Through the chair, I will need to take that on notice because I don't have that information in front of me. But I think we reduced some of the financial delegations significantly, but I'll need to provide that number to you.
Training package has been provided to all staff with financial delegations in brackets approximately 400.
Yeah,
which represents half the staff. So I don't know if that's quite.
Yeah, I'm
I
happy
hope that's
to
not-
get those numbers
I hope
for
that's
you.
not right. Yeah. And then on page 69, there was some mention about recruiting casual rangers, and that action's 18 months overdue. So I'm just wondering how that one's tracking.
Through the chair, we're regularly recruiting casual rangers and our permanent rangers as well. So it's more of an ongoing exercise rather than overdue, I guess.
Okay.
So we probably can put some updated words in there, I think. Yep.
Okay.
Any other questions? Or, we've got a resolution in front of ourselves to receive and note the update, including those bunch of things, and receives and notes the data governance internal audit scope. Providing the following feedback. Is there any feedback before I ask for a proposer? Is there any feedback anyone wants to provide? If not, I'll just suggest we delete those words there. And would someone like to propose that? Would someone like to move those two motions there? For me? Thanks, Andrew. Seconded. All those in favour? Okay, thank you. Agenda item 7.3 is the budget and long-term financial plan assumptions. Did you want to speak to this, David, or?
Sure, through the chair. Item 7.3 being the 24-25 budget and LTFP assumptions. This report is obviously here today for the ARC members to discuss the key assumptions, but it would be remiss of us not to touch on ASCOSA's advice that was recently received, which also helps frame our budget planning and assumptions in our long-term financial plan. So I might just talk to that particular report or advice really quickly, noting that we received said report in the middle of February, and that a detailed response will come to the ARC at the next meeting and will also be tabled at council. But within one of the documents, there was a one-page.
Sorry, David, can I just cut you off there?
Sure.
So a detailed response will come to the ARC and will go to council. So the ARC's prior view on that detailed response is not welcome either. In my world, what you would do is you would get the ARC's response and furnish both that and the detailed report to council. But the way that you're putting it to us is that the same report will go to the ARC and to council.
That was not my intention, the words that I used. And when it comes to that report being tabled at the ARC, we will have a recommendation around noting the report. And similar to some of the other reports that are contained with this agenda, if there's other items that would like to be added to that by the ARC and the members of the ARC, we would more than welcome.
Okay, that's clear. But can we have considered that, seeing that report at that point in time?
So they would have seen the advice because we have shared the advice itself. The report will be coming to this forum first, and the opportunity will be there to provide comment, and then it will go to the chamber after that.
Okay. Sorry, continue.
No worries. So, within one of the reports, there's an overview which contains some pretty key information, and the one paragraph that's at the very top of that overview is the Central Services Commission finds the City of Onkaparinga's current financial performance potentially unsustainable, but is taking steps towards a position of becoming more sustainable with projected small future surpluses on a consolidated basis. So that was it in a nutshell. Within that page, there's a few risks. It talks about what continued, and it also talks about the recommendations in that report that we will bring back to the ARC, kind of similar to what we do with KPMG audits. We'll work through the recommendations and we'll provide a management response. But if I just touch on a couple of the key points quickly, there were 4 risks that were highlighted, that were potentially impacting sustainability. One of them was if cost growth exceeds council's long-term planning forecasts. There's no doubt that this is definitely a risk and a pressure. The local government price index, so the LGPI, measures price movement faced by local government in South Australia. It's a bit more, tailored than what the CPI is. And in recent years, that number has been above CPI. And if we are pinning our rates to CPI, then there's a risk there in that difference. When we look at things like utilities and fuel, they're often above CPI. So it is a constant thing that we seek to address through the management of our budgets. That long-term financial plan and infrastructure asset management plans are not properly aligned or updated regularly. As we're all aware, we are currently doing a deep dive into our LTFP, which will be coming to the ARC and the Chamber over the coming months. And we're also reviewing our strategic asset management plan, which is an annual occurrence. Recently, the LTFP was not aligned to the SAMP. However, that will be addressed through this deep dive of the LTFP. There's a risk there around asset renewals not undertaken to sufficient levels to meet the required service standards or community expectations. There is no doubt there is currently a gap between the asset renewal and depreciation figure. We've had some discussion around depreciation. I believe we'll have some more today on that. We have been investigating that and we have made some changes. We're currently looking at the stormwater asset class. We've looked at other asset classes in recent times. So that is something that is already a work in progress. And the fourth dot point under the risks that SCOSA had was maintaining and holding assets which are excess to requirements and do not provide benefit to the broader community. So there's a couple of components to that. So where we're having or holding surplus assets, there's the upkeep and maintenance or renewal of those assets that are not deriving any benefit to the organisation. And another side of that coin is when we do dispose of assets, we potentially can use those funds to fund other projects, other work. We can pay down debt, and when we pay down debt, that obviously reduces our interest expense as well. So there's a positive benefit there. So they were the four key risks that were calling out. Of the Commission's 12 recommendations, the majority of these are already being addressed by administration with the elected member. We've had a number of sessions of recent times on that. We'll bring back further detail in that report. However, I'd like to call out three particular recommendations that will require the appetite and desire of the Chamber. One of them being consider options to increase income to move forward to a more financially sustainable position. There's no doubt that rates are, a key component to our income. The next category is grants. However, we are working on what other revenue streams may look like to reduce our reliance on that and bringing that to the Chamber. The second dot point, identify and dispose of those assets that have reached the end of their useful lives or access to requirements to reduce debt and future liabilities. We're working through that. We believe we have identified assets and land that is surplus to requirements. However, that will require the Chamber to agree to go to consultation, then it goes to the state government for approval, then comes back. So there is a journey on that, but we require decisions of council. And the third one, provide more funding for asset renewal rather than prioritising initiatives which involve new or upgraded infrastructure. Everybody likes cutting ribbons and doing new things. And, come state and federal election time where members, are advocating and members are looking potentially to support initiatives. We just need to be mindful of, the ongoing financial commitment of these new things that we may choose to build. So that's another pressure that all local governments face. They're probably the key components of that report that I wanted to call out. Happy to take any questions on the report itself or any of the recommendations, risks, or whatever. Noting that we are here to talk about 7.3 and we will get to that also, but happy to take anything on.
Can I make a suggestion about process? And I need a little bit of advice here. As I understand it, we ask questions, then someone moves the motion, and then we have the discussion. Yeah, I suspect that all of us have probably got a mix of discussion and questions in relation to these matters. So I don't feel that it's productive simply to constrain ourselves to questions first and discussion later. So to that end, I would suggest that we get the motion on the table and so that we can have a discussion. But the problem is when the motion is written and provides the following feedback, then that feedback's not informed by the discussion. It's the wrong way around.
I think maybe on the last occasion we suspended so we could do the very thing you're suggesting. Was it last meeting or that might have been a meeting right here? I think we may have suspended so we could do the very thing you're suggesting and then resumed, because I think you're right. There's a lot of things that arise. But if we have to stick within the
Yeah, so.
bento box sort of thing, it's going to be challenging.
Situation between questions and discussions is not productive.
So you just ask for leave the meeting to suspend formal meeting procedures and those show.
Okay, so.
I'm happy to move.
So I'm told that all I've got to do is ask leave of the meeting to suspend for proceedings and just on the basis of a show of hands. Yeah, great.
Yep.
All right, well, with the benefit of, thank you, Desmond, with the benefit of that, who wants to go first? Well,
I might go first because I know the two of you will have lots of technical issues around appreciation, but I just have really one question. It's a process matter. When you say that it will come back, is that, I've just checked, we've got a meeting in April. Is that April? Is that when we'll do this deep discussion around, because I appreciate this lobbed recently, February, I think you said, and we were privy to it early March, I believe. I'm uncomfortable, I suppose, with the discussion. I mean, normally we could talk about budgets and long-term financial planning. Normally at this time we would be doing all that. It's really hard to ignore the elephant in the room. And I'm uncomfortable around doing all that and then doing this goes a discussion. If you weren't the subject of it, then we would just be proceeding normally. It's fair to say it's not the most positive one I've seen in other councils. So is that the intent? And I do appreciate it would have been difficult for you to been ready to do it today, but it's more of a process question around, are we really in a position to deal with these issues when that hasn't been done yet? And can it happen in April? And will that still work? Sorry, that's about
your
the question.
All I wanted to keep in mind is that according to the paper, it says the LTFP was adopted by council on 12 December. Now, I wasn't here for the last meeting, but I don't recall that coming to this committee. So it wasn't. The fact that we're going to be engaged in it now reads to me right after the event.
Through the chair, it was the long-term financial plan principles that were adopted by council, and they were the same principles that came to the Audit and Risk Committee for discussion prior to being tabled at council. Yeah. So the long-term financial plan will come up as part of the April meeting. To Paula's question about the process, we're required through the legislation as part of the annual business plan to include the disclosure response, the disclosure advice, and also our response. So our I suppose the process that we envisage is that we include our responses in the annual business plan, which is coming to the Audit and Risk Committee meeting on the 11th of April, prior to it going to council, and then it'll go out for consultation. So there will be an opportunity for input from this committee into our responses to those recommendations.
Perhaps my question wasn't quite clear. I think that needs to happen before we start talking about long-term financial plans and budgets. Is that, rather than do that and then do this and then somehow tap that on? Is that your sense?
So through the chair, with the timeframes, we will need to bring our long-term financial plan and annual business plan to the same meeting. As David has mentioned, there are a number of the recommendations that are already in progress, and we are certainly happy to talk to those today in terms of the work that we and elected members are doing. Not just because of the disclosure recommendations, but because we were aware that our financial position needed some heavy lifting in order to be in a better place.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Just one quick. Thanks, Dave, for that. Those three areas that you were saying we were looking to the increase in the revenue and selling assets and the renewal focus. Will that affect this year's potential deficit, or we're looking to be able to look more positively towards the 24-25 with a surplus? Is that, yeah?
So we're obviously a fair way through the 23-24 year, and our ability to address these things over the next 3 months to ensure or to drive a surplus position this year is not possible. but very much the 24-25 budget, which kicks off in 3 or 4 months' time, will have components addressing these dot points within that budget, similar to the items that we've discussed with elected members, with the intention of the, I guess, position that administration will be putting forward to elected members is a surplus budget, and then it will be, we'll give the opportunity for a surplus budget, and it will be the elected members who make the decisions around certain things and whether they accept it or not. But essentially the budget that we'll be putting up will be a surplus budget for 24-25.
Through the chair, committee members, if I could just add a couple of comments. The SCOSA report and the tabling of it is a sort of some mechanical thing in terms of the timing and us wanting to do a proper process to document the response to the SCOSA report. If there are elected members and the ARC members would like a discussion on the SCOSA report, and you've got early feedback and comments or questions you've got based on the reading of the SCOSA report, administration side, the recommendations and the content in there, there's not a lot of surprises at all. It's pretty much right across the content of it. So if there was feedback and comments that you wanted to have at this meeting that would be valuable, that could then help us inform the development of our response to the SCOSA report at the next meeting. We'd be open to that. It's really just the mechanics and the timing of getting the report on table and getting it through the cycle over time, while we were also working with our elected members through very good budget processes, which they'll be well aware of. So it's just that timing sense. So that I'm very open to questions and comments, discussions to help the committee address those in preparation for any discussion around that long-term financial plan principles.
In support of that, can I just say that it seems to me that's an important point, because I can't imagine how any things that we have to say on the 11th of April are going to get traction via council before community consultation starts on the 16th of April. It looks like a faux process to me. So I'd like to go over this. So I would recommend that we have our discussion on this SCOSA report right now.
That's really the point, I suppose, we've been trying to make, that it actually would be better to do that and then that feed into that rather than happening concurrently or, parallel. It just feels like it's a missed opportunity that we'll be playing catch up.
Yeah. Andrew.
Yeah, probably somewhere on that line. I can see the challenges right around, because surely in the ideal world, I know timing hasn't helped, but I was looking for what the management response was to the SCOSA report, which would feed straight into a long-term financial plan, get me comfortable with what the assumptions are. And I'm confident by some of what David has said that we will see our budget, for instance, that's actually got a surplus in it. So some of that is a bit satisfying. Certainly in relation to the current long-term financial plan, I've been saying that our recommendation back to council does stipulate that it should take into consideration issues raised by SCOSA in their report. And you probably tell me that you've got that in hand. I think our recommendation would be to council that is. I do note in some of the recommendations or the assumptions made while you're aiming for a surplus, it doesn't appear to indicate how you're going to get to that surplus. While looking at some of the figures, for instance, there's no cost saving target in it. Well, I know SCOSA's raised that. It would be good to see that within some of the assumptions. Also, some indication of how you intended to bring the budget back into surplus. So we could have some confidence that, yes, those assumptions are right, because we know that you're also pulling these other levers to pull things back into place. And that might guide us on what the recommendation that you've got, that might be an above CPI rate increase required, to see how all those levers come into place.
Through the chair, perhaps commitments, if I can just add some colour and light in terms of some of the process we've come today. The recommendations in the disclosure report, and I think there's about 11 recommendations. Each one of those really lead up to the disclosure report have already been things we've been actively working on. In the background as well, fully expecting that the report would come from disclosure around this time was actually quite from the administration point of view in terms of reinforcing the things that we're already doing. So it was actually a confirmation of the path we're already on. This budget cycle, we've approached the budget quite differently in terms of engaging the whole workforce really before Christmas in preparation for this budget cycle. As a result of those efforts, we had over 60 distinct different ideas, both short and long term, both on revenue and expenses that we shared with elected members on a 4-day weekend budget session. So there is a lot of the recommendations can and were considered in developing those ideas. I think David's point earlier really is that we've done the hard work to enable the council to try to reach those conclusions, but ultimately, as part of democracy, the elected members are the ones who will make the final decision on that. The visibility around the budget development and where it finally lands, I think there's an opportunity, given the amount of ideas that we've put forward, will strongly align with what disclosure has recommended, down pressure on costs, including additional revenue ideas, including having a look at potential surplus lands over a period of time. So there's a very strong alignment between what disclosures recommended and the ideas that have already been thought about and presented to elected members. The timing and sequencing is such that that won't be visible until the budget lands and until the members made a decision on it. And obviously we'll be in a position to go out to the community to say, here's where the elected members have landed on their budget for what's community, and how does that align with disclosure recommendations? And I think there's plenty of options there for a very strong alignment in terms of what's been recommended and where the budget could land. And that's certainly our strong desire in the administration. So while the disclosure report is identify some challenges, we acknowledge those challenges that they are real. There is very much a conscious effort already well in play in terms of how we address that, and there is absolutely a path forward to a surplus. And in fact, one of the long-term financial principles that the Chamber endorsed in December was to get back to surplus in the term of this Chamber. So that's what we're working towards.
Perhaps at this point I should. Sorry, Councillor.
I was just going to talk with regards back to item 7.3, just doing those assumptions. And I guess one of the assumptions that's not in here is around asset disposal. And I know that we previously had a target in the LTFP which wasn't achieved. So I was probably looking for some, if we're going to align with the disclosure, have some words in the response around what that might be. And the second one was just around the CBOU-MS assumptions and what might be included in the LTFP in the budget. I'm not sure if we need to call that out specifically in this document, but from the elected member body, knowing that we're looking to move to full cost recovery, perhaps putting that in this report, to actually point that out to the elected member body might be useful.
Sorry, through the chair, if I could just respond to that. I'm very happy to include it in future long-term financial plans. The challenge we have is that at this point in time, while that's one of the options that have been explored and previously raised, it's not until the council formally resolves that we can actually really embed that into the document. So it's this desire to present those options, and as we present the budget and the long-term financial plan on the 14th, is it? Sorry, I've got the date wrong there, but that's when it will be. So this is a challenging bit where the administration are working up those ideas. We haven't landed firm decisions from the Chamber other than getting some direction and some guidance and sense making. But the formal decision will be at the Chamber, and that's where it will be debated. And then that's when we'll go up to the community consultation around that.
I guess my comment is rather than a decision, but some words around the assumptions with regards to CEDO missing, since this is around the assumptions, what assumptions we might need or possibly could include in this report, and what assumptions with regards to asset disposal, whether it's just simply that it's been considered or it'll be attempted, or but just because to highlight those two areas, we've talked about a few other assumptions. Those two are critical for me.
Perhaps I could go back, Councillor, to your first four words about aligning with the SCOSA report. My own view is not to align with the SCOSA report. The SCOSA report is, in my judgment, deeply flawed. Trying to take up too much time to oversimplify it, says you've got to do three things. You've got to run a surplus, you can't put up rates, and you've got to get your asset renewal ratio back to 100%. Well, you can only have two of those things. You can't have all three. It's not possible. And that seems to have escaped them. So choices have to be made. And to that end, I asked Jade to send around that information because I was looking at the asset renewal ratio, because I think the focus should not be on the numerator, but on the denominator. Because if you look at the denominator being what's required by the long-term financial plan, you know, the numerator being the actual expenditure. If you look at what is required by the long-term financial plan, over the last 5 years, it's an average of 29.3 million. The 5 years before that, it was an average of 24.2 million. Now, we all understand that for various reasons, the asset renewal effort has been increased, partly induced by other spheres of government. Yeah, but I don't see for the life of me why you would just feel the need to persist at this higher plateau. And I certainly can't see for the life of me why you would seek to have the expenditure equal to 100% of that. What you've got here is an accident of history. Depreciation's rising at, what is it, 6.2% per annum. And we've got this bloated asset renewal in the long-term financial plan, which will only serve to increase depreciation even further. Now, I'm very wary of the word verb in the paper about transitioning to a positive outcome. Transition's a very soft verb in my view. And my own preference, just to play my hand, is to have 2 years off asset renewal. Just, you know, it's running at, what is it, running at about $35 million a year. That's $70 million. Have a budget of $20 million for the next 2 years. Put $50 million back on the balance sheet, get the depreciation expense down, and get yourselves back into the black. That's what I'm used to in business. You've got to do these things.
Yeah, my view is, and I think it's covered by it and being talked about, is that what came out of SCOSA is that getting back to basics, that you need to update long-term financial plan, need to update the asset management plan. When you're updating the asset management plan in particular, I do agree with your depreciation that you see right across the sector, a variety of useful lives, evaluation rates, unit rates. There's a lot of moving parts within moving depreciation itself that will affect what your bottom line is and how much rates you raise. So I think there is an opportunity as part of the asset management plan to review depreciation as well as what is the condition of the assets, because the only issue potentially with what you've suggested, Chair, is it could mean that some of your assets might be deteriorating to an unacceptable level. So by just cutting out some of the renewal expenditure, That's not saying a renewal might be overstated, but it is a chance to really look at the service level that's been provided and therefore the depreciation and the renewal expenditure.
You know, I accept that. And I think if one or two of the assets don't get down to the unacceptable level, you're probably overfunding it. I was saying to these fellows yesterday, they're still driving in the Velo Appia.
Certainly agree that there's been a lot of depreciation more broadly and probably now across the sector. That probably is overinflated, which means potentially you're raising more rates than what's needed, and by reducing the depreciation, you're reducing your or improving your operating position. So I think there is some opportunity. I've seen some councils that have got a whole heap of assets that are depreciated down to zero, but they're still in active use and will be for some time to go. So there's an opportunity to review it from all aspects, both the renewal requirements, the depreciation, as well as I think what David said more broadly, what should be held.
But the other thing that's informing my urgency on this is the omission from the ASCOSA report, and it's about resilience to black swan events, adverse black swan events. And there's nothing in there. So you could run marginal surpluses for the next, often to the future, but you're not protected. And when you look at the balance sheet, we'll back out the fixed assets. There's not much there.
No, yeah, right. Particularly with the debt levels, that would be what you'd normally use black swan events to dig into some of your borrowings.
And so what I'm actually proposing is throwing $50 million at the debt levels. Someone's got to do it.
Through you, Joe, just to the point around financial resilience. As the council, we've spoken to elected members about the first baseline really is to get to this break-even budget in this cycle. We've also highlighted the need to, ideally, you want to actually get beyond just a balanced budget into a reasonable surplus. So you can then cash back and put aside some funding for reserves and for events such as, for example, COVID that hit the sector and that challenged quite a number of councils during those periods. So if you get some reserves and some cashback reserves in place, it builds that financial resilience and you can adapt to the environment. So we'll face at some point in the future. For us, it's about, well, let's get to that first hurdle. And then beyond that, how do we get to the next one, which is more about that financial resilience through the operating position.
So you've effectively got two scenarios. One is the sort of gradualist one that kind of gets you there with probably least pain. And then you get my one, which is the cold shower. So I don't see any other plausible scenarios.
I'm just looking at the director of city operations. I'm wondering whether, I'm wondering whether I should ask for a comment, but do you have anything to contribute to this, Kirk?
Through the chair, Kirk Richardson, Director of Operations. Look, we've been pushing renewal purposely for quite a number of years, in particular from where we received a lot of the federal and state grants, so 2 or 3 years ago. So we're already on the journey of pushing our renewal, which is why you see the renewal ratio below where it should be in the ASCOSA report. So that was always a given strategy that we were already using. In some cases, good question from elected members at the other workshop the other night around, could we actually push our plant replacement renewal? We've been doing that by osmosis because there's a worldwide shortage of trucks. So we're pushing those out. They've been pushed out essentially 2 years. We're now receiving higher maintenance bills, loss of productivity, and these types of things are then what creeps in when you don't have your renewal in the right spot at the right time. We'll be undertaking a significant piece of work next year, which is on our largest asset class, which is our road renewal
side of things. That will give us a really good indicator as to whether the strategies we've been using for the last 10 years are working, or whether we're over renewing, under renewing. And we always take that time as a time to pivot with council and actually look at what the future investment for what is our most expensive class of renewal. We took $4 million out of last financial year's budget in the roads renewal, for example. So some of exactly what the chair's saying, we have actually been starting to push into those spaces. Can you push much further? Our renewal is heavily based on data and real condition data. So if you want to push, you always have the opportunity to push, but you'll pay at some time. So it depends on what you're prepared to pay later in the process. If you have your road slip from a reseal to a reconstruct, you're going to pay 6 to 10 times the amount. So as long as you're fully aware that somewhere along the line you pay, you can use all these strategies, and they're definitely strategies that we do think about and actually implement as part of our ongoing discussions with our finance team.
Thank you. Can I just ask a couple of questions on that? What will it take to get the expenditure down? So the expenditure, the actual cash expenditure, the last five years, the average is $5 million more than the 5 years before that. What will it take to actually, is it possible to reverse that, to get it down to, what I was saying before, $10 million a year?
Through the chair, it really is class by class of assets. We know that we're underfunding stormwater renewal at the moment while we're doing a lot of catchment plans. So there's a back end of that. In the case of roads, it is very much a delicate piece of making sure that you're not over servicing, but you're not totally under servicing where things fall into disrepair, as you could see with some of the state roads at the moment. I think it is more a category by category. Get rid of the assets that you don't need, for starters. I mean, we've got a lot of buildings that are in the wrong place. We've got a lot of land that's in the wrong spot. We're maintaining those on a regular basis. That's one strategy to actually get that down. Our building portfolio has been in a backlog sort of situation. It's about on track now. And a lot of that is through some of the stimulus money that we received through the government. We were able to go back and actually put money into some of the buildings we know we're going to keep and actually get them into a fit for purpose state. So it's not an easy answer in that one.
And I don't think ratepayers understand that stimulus money provided by the government is going to hit them in the form of increased rates because of the higher depreciation charges.
And through
the stimulus.
I think the unit rate piece is very relative. We've just seen that with our stormwater review that we've done, where in the past they were changed from greenfield unit rates to brownfield unit rates, where the rate in the unit goes up quite staggeringly. When we've reviewed that back and then put them against the current unit rates, they were over exaggerated. And then, basically if you're putting an indexation on that, they get out of control. There's money to be found in that. We need to do further deep diving into our roads as well in the same. And then it really becomes an argument with the auditors. To a certain extent, because the practicalities of what you're doing and then the engineering practicalities, they don't sometimes meet in the middle. And I'm sure that there's a gap in there that we can address.
There's a reason auditors don't manage companies. Can I maybe just put this idea on the table? For our 11th April meeting, I wonder if it's possible to come back and tell us just what a cold shower would look like. Because picking up on your comments, which are, good, I'm thinking there's no point having a cold shower if it's just like one of those diets, where you put the weight straight back on. There's what we need, in my judgment, is a reduction in the spend, and for that to happen, we need a reduction in the denominator. The long-term financial plan needs to come back towards its historic plateau. But as you're saying, different classes of assets, there's different degrees of freedom in which to achieve that. What I'm wondering is, instead of looking at it as a sort of incremental and what we can do in stormwater, and how we can plan the roads a bit, if we simply said, if in the long-term financial plan we did something such as halve the provision for asset renewal, including capex, obviously, is what would that actually mean? What would that look like on the ground? What would be wrong with it? Because we know it's got a benefit, we get some cash. So what would be the negative? It may be that what you're doing is deferring an expense that's bigger later, and that expense is unavoidable. However, it may also be that some assets last a bit longer than you thought they would in practice, and that some people find it, not so bad to drive over one pothole on the way home. You never see roadworks in LA, do you? Ever. There's a reason for that. So I'm wondering if it's possible, and this is only something I would put to the other members of this committee. I'm not putting a request direct to you. The other members of the committee would have to support it. But I'm wondering if it's possible to get some sort of options articulated, which address those various issues.
Through Chair, one thing you've said is based on historic expenditure rates. Those historic expenditure rates were based on having a backlog of renewal that was required to be done in those given years. So I'm not sure it's a good baseline to be going from. To actually do the predictive modelling, which I think is what you're responding to, in the case of roads, we can do that quite well. Of if you spend less now, what does it mean down the track? We would have to go back to our previous data. That's the intention of the new modelling that comes out next year. So what that will do is paint the scenarios of if you spend less now, what does that mean over the next 10 or 20 year period? What's your value proposition in there? Can you spend less now and it has virtually no effect? Well, then you would take the option if it has a significant spike in 5 years' time, which is actually what the last lot of road modelling told us, that if we didn't continue to keep up with our road renewal, we would see a big spike. In other words, you've reached your capacity. So we can certainly do that type of modelling. Can we do it before April? No, that's probably not something that we're capable of. You can do the higher level financial analysis around what would it mean for the long-term financial plan, but I don't know that'll give you the right outcome from the asset base.
Is it possible to get third-party review of that modelling? I've done a lot of work with engineers.
Yeah, when we do the road review, we actually have third-party review of that, as well as we've got some very good internal technical people.
Right.
And we don't take necessarily what the engineers tell us at face value. We then actually interrogate that and actually develop a more refined model, and then that's actually verified on ground. So then we actually go out and verify on ground and actually push. Every year we push our roads every year. So
when we get a grant from state or federal government, do we MPV all that? Work out, cost benefit analysis, are we actually better off or worse off? Because you're not necessarily better off.
Through the Chair, I totally agree. Gifted assets are not always a gift. The key where we were more successful in the previous advocacy leading up was that many of the projects that were funded were projects that were a high priority that we required to do ourselves at some point in time in the future, and 90% of them were 100% funded. So they were works that council were requiring to do at some point in time. That naturally leads to more depreciation and obviously minimal maintenance up front, but then higher maintenance as you go forward in the journey.
Yeah, but because you've done that, you've now got the absurdity of the scales are criticising you. It's allowing the ratio to fall under 100%.
Yes.
You know,
that was a known to us.
I've spoken enough. Has anyone got any ideas about what they'd like to see happen?
I've just been putting some words together that I'm happy to take feedback on. That the Audit and Risk Committee note the assumptions proposed to be used in development of the 2024-25 budget. The Audit and Risk Committee recommend the budget should also have consideration for the recommendations contained in the SCOSA report. The Audit and Risk Committee note that any assumptions that the assumptions may need to be reviewed in light of the desire to achieve a surplus and a sustained financial result in the long-term financial plan.
Yeah. Any comment?
Yeah, I like that. I like that last one because one of the assumptions for the financial plan principles talks about through the long-term financial plan and annual budgeting process, council addressed the structural deficit position, transitions to a balanced budget in this council term and maintains a surplus going forward. Now we've still got a number of budgets in this term, so I like the idea of sort of really focusing on getting into a surplus sooner than later, rather than leave it right till the last year of the term, which would be a tick to that principle. So I like that focus for sure. Yeah.
You leave yourself no wiggle room if at the last moment we have another black swan.
Sorry?
If you wait till the end of the term to do the very thing you've committed to do and there's another black swan event, then you've got no wiggle room.
Yeah. You know, my only difficulty is that we're noting again that I kind of feel that in this space we should be acting, because what I'm looking at is commendable efforts being made to return the council's P&L to a profit, right? If it's $1, it's a profit, yeah? But the balance sheet is so weak that I think this resilience issue is a serious issue. And there's only one way of dealing with it, and that's to improve the put some muscle on the balance sheet. And if that means a bit more congestion or driving over some potholes, then in my judgment, you know, that's a real consideration for council to make. But I really feel that council needs to have those options in front of it. Because it's not for us, I don't think, to make that judgment. It's for us to advise. And I'm just a bit concerned that in terms of this resilience, that the more radical options need to be articulated. And that's what I was asking about before, about coming back with, well, what happens if the budget's reduced to $15 million a year? What do you lose? And, you know, I mean, there's two things that happen. You either defer an expense or you put up with a lesser level of service. Well, a lesser level of service doesn't seem to me to be such a bad thing. If you've been living beyond your means and you don't want to slow people to higher rates, then it's a necessary corollary of having a low level of service. I just think that this kind of incremental approach, well, this doesn't do it for me.
The elected member they presented with the 5-year renewal summary, so we had a workshop on Tuesday night, which I guess is, I'm just trying to think through what you're recommending. That's where it's presented. So that's the project list, and that's the, you know, for next year it's $31.7 million in renewal spending, broken down into the categories and the individual projects. So I guess the elected member body is receiving a 5-year renewal summary and a new and significant upgrade 5-year summary. And it seems that what you're trying to propose is like, I guess we didn't dive into the individual projects and it wasn't a range that we were given it, but this is what's proposed around current LTFP principles. And so, yeah, I'm not sure whether the ARC, having not seen that list or having a view on that list, maybe what you're looking for potentially.
My thinking is to do it the other way around. My thinking is to say the ARC considers that a budget above $15 million for each of the next 2 years fails to come to grips with the current financial situation, and recommends that management provide council with advice on what a $15 million budget would look like. So Andrew, I'm fine with your form of words, except that some seems a bit complimentary of the scales, and I don't want to go that far. But secondly, I'm just wondering what the action is out of it.
I probably see it that we're providing advice back in relation to initial assumptions. I think most of the debate will be we actually see what management comes back to and how they've actually addressed not only the scales. Yes, I agree with your comments that I'm shy of being too supportive, but I must admit most of their comments were, I think there were no surprises in them.
Yeah.
That aside, I'm looking forward to seeing how management are going to come back with this budget. Budget, which would be positive, and seeing the multitude of issues that they need to address, including some you've raised that give us multiple of that can be put to see what comes back that's going to achieve our objective of ensuring the council is sustainable long term.
Okay. Perhaps I can ask our chief executive if he's got a thought on this.
I guess my thoughts are that really there is absolutely an urgency from the administration and the chamber, I believe, to get this back to a balanced budget. And the options available to the chamber to get a balance in this next month. Those discussions have already been had. I think the debt equation is probably the big elephant in the room. My thinking on that really for this chamber was to let's get back to the break-even position. Let's get beyond that to financial resilience, in your words, Chair. And then the debt strategy in my mind is actually a completely different approach, because the sort of nickel and diming that we do, and you've come up with a very bold old chef approach to asset renewal, but the nickel and diming around the edges on smaller things to try to deal with $130 odd million debt issue will one either, well, I won't be here, I'll be in the ground. That will take a very long time, or it's just not pragmatic and has too much impact on the community today. So there's an alternative strategy we're working on. I've said to the elected members that strategy, which in my view involves a level of measured investing, is definitely viable, but we haven't turned our minds to that yet, because there's a natural sequencing that you have to do to get the ship back in order before you even start to look at those options. So I do appreciate you, Chair, being very bold in your approach. I think there's certainly, and I can say this hand on heart, that we've tried to push the chamber with all of our ideas, and some of them won't be popular with the community, but we felt that was necessary. And we're certainly confident there's enough options there for this next budget to bring us back to a balanced position, but that's ultimately a decision for the chamber.
I certainly agree with that. Yeah.
I'm just conscious of that last remark about the popularity of this and the challenges that might ensue, and I accept what you're saying in terms of the elected members' administration being across this and onto it and all that. But I'm just wondering, does it still not warrant a sort of a fairly strong response from the ARC, the majority of which are independent members, and that might actually assist in the passage of this rather than being seen to beat up administration or elected members, more about actually this is something that we really need to seriously address, and we need as a committee, the majority of which are independent, to raise concerns around if you don't, this is really serious. I just wonder whether that would be helpful or a hindrance.
Through the chair, absolutely helpful from my perspective. So it's been clear demonstration from discussions that the committee is taking the disclosure report very seriously, as it should, as administration does. Any advice, views, statements that you wish to make to the chamber, I believe would be helpful, because they're certainly consistent with what we've done. So I look forward to what those set of words might be that sends that sentiment of the committee.
I recall on the committee council a few years ago, what was put forward was, at a similar level of seriousness, I guess, for today. And the committee, and this is inviting my other members, reviewed it significantly to send that message. And I think it was rare, like it didn't happen very often, but every now and then it needs to really be recrafted. And I think this is one of those opportunities, one of those occasions.
To that end, can I just get some clarification on how the deliberations of this committee will be communicated to council? No doubt they'll see the minutes, but my understanding is that many of our elected representatives reports back to the council. Now, just in picking up on Paul's point, because I think it's right, is that personally, I would like to see that communication include the point that there was a lively discussion about halving about reducing the asset renewal budget to roughly, 75 to 20 to about, what's that, Joe, 23%? Is whatever the percent is of its current level. For the precise reason, to pick up on what Paula was saying, so that they know that there are other options that they're achievable, like, like all the other options, they come at a price, at a cost, but they have a benefit too. And I think the need of this discussion, it would be good if that could be conveyed back to council, that it's not just a matter of fixing the operating statement, it's a matter of fixing the balance sheet too. And if you don't fix the balance sheet, then we're absolutely exposed to an adverse event that blast out of the water. So it seems to me, from some of the discussion, a lot of the focus has been on the operating statement and not enough on the balance sheet. So with the leave of the other members of this committee, I'd be very keen to see that conveyed directly to the council rather than in the minutes, whether it's by using the usual arrangement or whether you want me to turn up there and say something, I don't care. That's not the point. The point is that that the sense of urgency, which our chief executive has referred to, is conveyed, and the other idea is that because it's a SCOSA, somehow or other council might feel that they must be right. Well, they're actually not right, they're wrong. And so I would be keen for those messages to be got across. This probably isn't the place to wordsmith something like that. I'm happy to do that. For Councillor Young and Councillor Pritchard.
And indeed, that example I just gave, that's the very thing that the chair of that committee did afterwards, is what you've just suggested.
Right. So is that, Councillor?
I was just going to say, I think your attendance at the council meeting would certainly add to the discussion. So if you are in a position to, that'd be fantastic. And we do have another elected member in the room. So in our public gallery, we have.
Right now, I'm sorry, yes. We've met before. So I remember our first meeting, right?
And proxy art memories here as well. So we've got another member of our council, which is great.
Thank you for drawing that to my attention. How do we capture this? Andrew, how are you going there?
Sorry. I've added on first dot point that in comparing the 24-25 budget, the council should also give consideration to improving its balance sheet in addition to its operating position.
Yeah, and perhaps we can say that maybe we can work out which of you two is going to speak to the council and say, let's say it's Councillor Yeomans, and that the committee noted that Councillor Yeomans and the presiding member will be conveying the substance of this discussion to council. Is that? Picks up on your point, I hope, Paula.
I don't remember everything you read out, Andrew, but I liked all the content when you did read it out. And it's more gives consideration to, I feel like we could be a bit more direct or a bit more strong, recommends, a little bit more, I don't know what the word is, not as passive, more blunt, apparently.
Through the chair, I wonder whether it might benefit for the ARC to put a statement, its response to disclosure or the position on it, because that's a documented record of what your views are, that then can be used with the elected members, because that's a statement. You have a statement from another council's ARC on its views on its financial sustainability and the disclosure report.
That would actually, if we did that, the wording in Andrew's suggestions and suggested way forward, I think would be complementary and work well. Yes.
Well, perhaps council, as I think.
So perhaps, Chair, the resolution for consideration is that that the ARC resolved to put out to find a statement, make a statement in relation to financial sustainability of council and the disclosure report, and then that allows you some coverage as to what the words might look like outside of this session through some sort of mechanism that you become with the language around.
Well, sure, and you could add, if you want to, that the presiding member will draft it and circulate it.
Is your intention that as a statement that is approved by this committee, or as Tim said, you need to give someone responsibility in that motion?
Well, yeah, but if I draft it and I circulate it, then it will be approved by the committee out of session, won't it?
You can't do that. It has to be in the formal meeting. So the committee would have to hand over responsibility to you. You could do that informally, but they would have to.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Yeah, yeah.
You could circulate it informally.
So as I understand it, what's happening is I can draft it, circulate it informally, but we can't resolve it out of session. But I can have it as a statement from me, but there's no way that I want to do that. I want to have, even if it has to be informal agreement with each member of the committee.
Can I be convened out of session and held virtually for the purpose of finalising the statement?
It would be we can do an online meeting.
Okay. Okay. Well,
I wonder, Chair, whether for efficiency purposes, and the intent is that the ARC members agree to a set of terms, but then perhaps the chair, as the chair of the committee, ultimately signs off on that as the statement from the ARC. So that allows the delegation through the chair, but in working up that statement with the ARC members, just in practical sense, and more efficient.
If that would work.
everyone okay? Yeah. Now what we've got to do is get a form of words that captures it.
Team, we've got something written down. Being proposed.
Yeah, no, yeah. But see, that's been overtaken, hasn't it, by Andrews?
But this is it, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Everyone can see the resolution there in front of them? Yeah. If that's okay, I'll just get someone to prepare.
Okay, we just need to move out of informal. So just.
Maximum smart, became silent.
Sorry, Chair, and incorporating the comments from Andrew as well as that? Or is it that?
I think that gets picked up. I'll get those.
Okay.
Yeah. So would someone like to propose that motion?
Move.
Yeah, all right, seconded. Yep, councillor Yeomans, all those in favour? Thank you, it was a good discussion. The next agenda item is 7.4, which is leave accruals. Did you want to say something, Jade?
So through the chair, this report is in response to some questions that came out of I believe it was our October meeting and the presentation of the financial statements and the finding from the external auditors about the high leave balances. So this report just sets out our leave policy, the current balances, and what administration are doing to manage those leave balances.
Any discussion on this?
Just that question I have, to be able to, I'm sorry, I haven't checked my responses, but are you able to give us an overview or it's too soon?
Through the chair, we have endeavoured to run a report and get those figures, of which I received before just coming in here. So just looking at them for the first time, and I will caveat that I haven't had a chance to fact check it, but I assume that what I've received is correct. When it comes to the, I guess, numbers around the staff members above threshold. So with annual leave, it's 73 staff members, which is 8.7% of staff. Long service leave is 41, which is 4.9%. And toil, which you can imagine fluctuates more quickly than the others, is 20 staff members, which equates to 2.4% of staff. I might also just comment on some of the measures, I guess, that we've put in place since receiving the query or the comment from the auditors. And all staff email has gone out under the CEO News banner, talking about, I guess, all things leave, with a focus on the benefits of taking leave, because obviously there are a number of benefits of taking leave, and noting that over the COVID period, where people were not able to travel or do anything, that anecdotally we saw less people taking leave. So that email has gone out. In that email, the leave procedure was also a link to it, reminding those within our organisation of what our procedure is. And there was also direction given around next steps for everyone. It was around checking your leave balance, having a conversation with your people leader around your work priorities and timeframes, plan your next break and contact HR if you've got any queries. There was also direction for people leaders who play a role in ensuring staff take leave. Leaders have the ability within one council to check balances of staff. We encourage them to chat to their team members about their upcoming leave. And once again, the ability to work with HR if there's any issues. So that's the action that has been taken. Unfortunately, our ability at the holistic level, just to click a button and run a report, it's not as easy as that currently. However, we will, within people and culture and corporate, monitor the progress of these leave balances to ensure that they are, the people with leave above the policy are taking leave and take action if this is not occurring going forward.
Excuse me, through the chair. That was really helpful, David, and I'm really pleased to hear about that. When I read the report, I didn't get that strong vibe, if you know what I mean. It was like, I feel like it was a little bit passive. And now you're saying, oh, you've been very directive and clear and active in that. And I'm just making an observation that it's not necessarily the sense that I got from reading that report, but I do appreciate your update.
No, that's noted through the chair. I guess the report very much just addressed what the question was. And it was good that we had the opportunity to expand on that a little bit further through this conversation.
Can I just ask a very weakly related question? What's our policy about working from home?
We do have a remote working arrangements policy. I do not believe there's a hard and fast rule in there around how many days from home or in the office, if that's what you're asking. As you can imagine, through the various functions and services we provide, there's some people who do have the ability to work from home. There's others that are providing frontline services that are not. So, I guess first and foremost, we're able to meet operational requirements, but we do not have a hard and fast rule on how many days you must be present in the office or in the field for that matter.
You've gone to the journal as a thing. That was the point of my question, is about, this problem. Lots of organisations are experiencing the two classes of employees. Yeah, that's a very difficult issue. Anyway. On leave, we're simply being asked to note the report. You happy with that? Someone like to propose that we note the report? Yeah, Andrew, seconded. Councillor Pritchard, thank you. Which brings us to the next agenda item. Sorry?
Send that one to the vote.
Oh, all those in favour? Yep. So the strategic risk review, 7.5.
Thank you. So this report provides the information to the committee on the recent review of our strategic risks. The strategic risks as they currently stand relate to our strategic objectives, which are set out in the community plan, which is under review. So when we land the new community plan, we will be running a review process to ensure that our strategic objectives and our strategic risks align. So essentially, the strategic risk profile is only applicable for a few more weeks. Additionally, as part of the review, once the community plan lands, is that we would like to develop some metrics, and Chris can talk about those a little bit more, that will enable that improved monitoring for emerging situations that may impact a risk profile. It should also be noted that this report was drafted before we had received the ASCOSA report. And as part of the review process, the outcomes of this GOES report will help to inform the assessment of risk to council.
I hope not. It would be a serious error.
And I did notice that the risk for strategic risk of financial sustainability was low. You got a report saying it's unsustainable. So I assume that was yes.
Are there any other questions? I had a couple, I guess, just looking at some of the metrics, the failure to provide a safe environment, the likelihood doesn't change from possible as an inherent to the residual. It just seemed like that would have been something that through all of the bits and pieces the council does, that there would be a reduction in the likelihood of an accident or of a safe environment. So I thought that was a strange result.
Sorry, through the chair. Yeah, I don't know. There are a lot of things that happen that aren't mentioned in this report. And I'm just wondering if there's the reason why it's staying at that level is because there are other underlying issues that are not raised as part of this report. That's the only explanation I can think of.
Apologies, I mean, I would love to get questions through to you beforehand, but I was a bit behind this week.
Perhaps I can take it on notice and provide you with a response. Yeah,
because I had a second one was around the First Nations. So number 3, I guess, we haven't been able to agree the terms of reference with the First Nations People Advisory Group in this council term so far, and it just seemed like that risk was increasing at the moment. It feels like to us at the moment, well, to me, that risk is increasing. So I'm not sure how we can demonstrate that in this report. That I know there's some words in there around it, but there's sort of it's moving. The overall goes from high to low, but to me, that's changing actively.
I think through the chair, I think you're right. I think the issues that council are having in establishing the terms of reference of that committee will cause issues. We don't have that level of knowledge to draw on, so that will make decision making and informed decision making difficult. But I also note that there are things happening at a state government level with the state voice to Parliament, and I think that will. I foresee that having a large engagement with the community. People who are running to be nominated for that will be canvassing and drawing support for it. So I think there are other avenues of getting feedback from First Nations groups. And I think that's why that risk isn't elevating at the moment. But certainly, if we continue going forward and don't sort the terms of reference issues out, then I think, that risk will definitely increase.
Yep. Thank you. I had one more, which was, I guess it's probably relevant in the conversation we've been having, but the SAMP, so number 6, which is failure in strategic asset management and planning. Again, we don't change the likelihood through the inherent to the residual, but a huge change in consequence from major to insignificant. So again, the workings behind that one seem strange, or seem. I'd like to see the detail, I guess, rather than saying it seems strange. Because we've done a lot of planning, so I would have thought the likelihood would reduce, and the consequence change is quite large.
And I think our controls are focused on reducing the consequences more than they are in reducing the likelihood. But again, I'll take that on notice and I'll provide you with a more detailed response. Thank you.
Just got a couple if I can.
Awesome.
Just on page 105, and this talks about consequence. So I was just interested in how we derive it, the catastrophic consequence, because only 2 out of the 14 risks have a consequence of less than catastrophic. Now, catastrophic's quite dramatic. So when you're sort of looking at, for instance, failure to anticipate and plan for the changing needs and expectations of residents, if we don't do that, we're saying that's a catastrophic consequence. I'm just wondering how that's derived, because I couldn't. It might be in the report that I've missed, and if I have, I apologise. But and there's I went through a number of them. I won't read them all out, but
through the chair. So you're talking about the inherent risk ratings. Yeah, so they were determined back when we first drew up the list of strategic risks, and they were appointed at the time by the CEO and directors group that attended that session. Unfortunately, I was unable to attend that session, so I don't know why they appointed those values, but that is where they were appointed. And so when we go through with a new community plan, we go through and create a new strategic risk register, we'll assign those again at that point.
Well, you'll assign those same consequences, or you'll have a workshop and
we'll review them.
So it wasn't a matrix as such, it was just what we thought would be the.
Oh, sorry, someone coughed. I didn't hear what you said.
Yeah, so it was just more subjective, that sort of thing.
They are subjective, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Through the chair, they are subjective, but there is a matrix that is applied. Yes, just to be clear.
Okay, so that's not. I've missed it. That's not here, is it? No.
There is a matrix. I'm not sure if it's contained. Is it in the report?
It's page 105.
Is it?
So you look at the likelihood on one axis, and the other axis is the consequence.
That's right.
So if it's likely and it's got a major consequence, and that's how it ends up in the catastrophic category. It's not uncommon for councils. There will always be a level of inherent catastrophic risks. It's really about the controls you put in place, and then the residual risk that remains.
You set yourself up pretty high for. Yeah.
So through the chair, the inherent risk is if we took no action and had no controls in place. So that's why it's catastrophic.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I just had one more question, if I can. I'm just trying to find it on page. It was on page 121. It's not. My computer's not going straight there. It related to 7.5. It related to the comment in relation to grants, and there just seemed to be there's some commentary there about the way that the grants was the process there. So I'm just wondering whether there was any, or whether you're able to comment, might be out of the scope of this one. But there was obviously some concerns there in relation to elected members of administration going through that grant process. I'm just wondering whether you read anything in that report as to whether they had a similar risk with elected members being on the council assessment panel, because I sort of see that as a bit of a risk as well. And not all councils do that. This council does, and that's fine. But from a risk perspective, I'm just wondering whether whether you saw that in that report that we need to consider.
Through the chair, yeah, that is a definite concern. We've done quite a few. We've done a recent grants audit, and we did an internal audit on exactly that risk. We found then that our process of assessment of the grants greatly reduces the opportunity for an elected member to commit fraud or corruption during the administration of the grants process. And we were quite happy that risk can't happen. Yeah,
Was there anything contained in that report that talked about elected members being on, as a risk to council, elected members being on the council assessment panel, the planning development? No, wasn't there, you didn't notice anything, that's right.
no, I don't know about that.
Yeah, okay.
I'm afraid.
Through the chair, councillor, I mean, the short answer is if you want to eliminate risk and elected members having a say in grants, then the short answer is if you want to completely eliminate it, then the councillors aren't involved. Obviously, you balance that out with the processes are in place to try to protect that. So, you know, the instances I've seen in other states where it becomes really problematic is when you have award grants and it's the elected members who have access to a award grant and then allocate that based on showing need, and that can open up to very difficult set of circumstances where you potentially have those conflicts. But generally, we've got a diverse set of views around the table, officers as well. It does reduce that risk. But if you want to completely eliminate it, then you don't have elected members as part of that decision making, and that removes the risk. But that comes with other implications as well.
Through the chair, sorry. Number 13, which talks about AI. I'm going to sound really geeky now, but my organisation's been grappling with this as well, and City of Mitcham has policy in relation to which dealt with late last year, and I'm commenting more perhaps in the second paragraph, proliferation and widespread. Yep, absolutely agree with that. With the position stated, government, etc., not feasible or desirable. I'd probably accept that. But we actually have a policy which seeks to extrapolate and evaluate some of the risks of this environment. Do this, make sure they're not like that because you're going to raise privilege and legal advice. You know, are we consciously acknowledging that it is happening and putting some framework around it, or just going, oh well, it's happening, and yeah, let's hope nothing happens.
No, absolutely not. Through the chair, we have just run a risk assessment process across, and we're continuing to work on the artificial intelligence, and we will be putting forward a policy on that. We know City of Holdfast Bay also have introduced a policy.
Sorry, I said Mitcham and I meant to say Holdfast.
And it's certainly something that every council, the radar should be up on every single council, and we're lobbying the LGA and the mutual liability scheme as well to provide some resources, particularly for smaller councils who will need it the most.
Well, good. Well, I don't think that there's. We've got the recommendation in front of us. I don't think that there's anything, unless I'm not reading it right, in that discussion that requires amending that recommendation.
I think, Chair, is there any opportunity to look at a trend? I guess some of my comments were around how's it shifting from one. We've obviously got item 12, which had a change. I guess we don't know when these, so the rest of them may have been from the original work which was done when the register was first prepared. So I'm not sure if there's a way of doing some trend analysis on these risks and
just make sure I understand and maybe take it a step further. We get those reports and others like them for every one of these meetings. There's another way of doing this, isn't there? And that's just to list what's changed since the last meeting. They've been assigned to a different category, save a few forests, and streamline this discussion a bit. I don't know.
I'm not sure about that. But looking at the paper, there is somewhat changed since the last assessment in August 2023. So I guess that is the trend that I was looking for.
Well, that's because they've assumed you've committed the last report to memory.
It's a comment at the start saying there's red arrows going left and up and down, whatever. My document doesn't seem to have any arrows. I wonder whether it's something that you lose in the printing or something. Do you know what I'm referring to? Sorry, I'll find it.
That's a halfway house, isn't it? One is to get the report as it is, but just have some legend or something for it's actually changed.
Through the chair, as the result of when we go back and review the strategic risk, we will be reviewing how we report to this committee as well. So we're happy to
perhaps it'll assist you if we provide a guide that we're looking for something a bit more streamlined that's focused on things that have changed over the period since the last meeting. Is that any help?
Through the chair, it's at the bottom of page 104 that comment is made, red arrow denotes changes, but I can't actually detect any arrows. So I mean, that would be helpful and that would be lovely, but I don't see them. It might be me.
Through the chair, there are no red arrows in this report, but there have been in previous ones where there's been a change. So apologies for that. I probably should have taken that line out.
Or say in the absence of arrows, no change.
Excellent.
I don't think we need to put that stuff into the recommendation, do we? Yeah, into the resolution, I mean. No? Okay, on that basis, would somebody like to, thanks Paul, move the motion? Seconded. Thanks, councillor. All those in favour? Okay, thank you. That brings us to 7.6, corporate governance, second quarter report. We're being asked to receive and note the report. Anyone want to say anything? Or?
Well, I think it's fairly straightforward through the chair.
Is there any questions?
I just had one question about the Manga Aquatic Centre mining incidents. I think that was something. Just trying to grab the page. You probably any further information that we need to be aware of. No.
Through the chair, that related to some damage to the floor of the pool where there were some tiles missing, and then there was some minor injuries to users of the organisation, but I believe that's been resolved now.
Sorry, Chair, perhaps I'll just add to that, councillor. So the Manga Aquatics and Recreation Centre is a very old asset. So Desmond's right in terms of just the minor stuff that's been worked on already, but I think there's a broader piece around looking at how that might be rejuvenated or done something differently. We've got a live notice of motion from Councillor Drew on looking at the feasibility of what that might look like. And so while we're dealing with the operational stuff, I think there's a really big picture, and it is a very tight asset. And we're having a very good look at that. So I expect that in this calendar year, sometime we'll be back in front of the elected members to have a bit of a session on that facility.
Through the chair, the comments that you've just made sort of kind of confirm my thoughts. I find this report interesting, as in it gives me a perspective around a number of issues, but I'm not sure exactly where some of it's coming to us from a sort of strategic risk management perspective. And I'm just querying, and it's more of an observation as to the nature of this report and the operational level of some of it. And I'm curious about anything, and I'd be very interested in any historical reasons for that.
So through the chair, you take that feedback on board. We have had previous feedback that elected members and committee members like to hear about some of the operational exercises that we're undertaking in the risk management space. But yeah, take that feedback on board.
not to suggest, through the chair, not to suggest that this isn't important work. I'm just trying to get the risk committee lens of some of it. Certainly the observation around the age of a particular asset and whether definitely, and I'm not suggesting that everything in that report is not, but some of it felt a little like, okay, well, why do I need to know that? I'm not sure. And that's why it's an invitation, I guess, to have a think about what needs to come here. And other members may have a different view, of course.
Yeah, certainly take that feedback on board. I guess some of the detail in the report also points to the fact that our risk culture is maturing. The amount of engagement that we're having across the organisation with Chris and the team to undertake risk assessments that were previously not thought of has been really pleasing.
Yeah, even that sort of summary, and this is evidence of that, even that would have been, I would tick more the box now. I found the report interesting, but I wasn't really sure why it was in the way it was, and I assume there was some historical reasons. So it's an invitation, nothing. It's not, please don't take it as criticism. Curious more than anything.
You mean you don't want to ask a question about the Waranga Hill climb?
No, I'm not. I think the season there, but I'm not sure that it's relevant to my but thank you, Chair, for that opportunity.
Okay. I think we're being asked to receive and note the report.
More than happy.
Proposed by Paul, seconded Andrew. All those in favour? Thank you. That brings us to agenda item 7.7, the annual performance review feedback. Maybe I could just introduce this item by saying that I had the benefit of a discussion with the management about this yesterday, and I'm going to propose that we defer it until the 11th April meeting. The reason I'm going to propose that we defer it is that there seems a good opportunity to raise for us to deal with some other process issues about the committee and the way it's run. And the reason I link it to this is that I don't think, I'm not prosecuting Casey, but for me, this is not this is not a robust process for performance review. And so I thought if we could kick that process around some more, I'll be straightforward. It seems to me that performance review of this committee, it's a committee of 5 people. I'm sure we can do a very adequate job just of ourselves. Yeah, the committee does not exist in isolation from management or indeed from council, and its performance is profoundly affected by both of those entities. And survey and all that seems to me something invented for a different purpose. So I'm not asking you to agree with that proposition. I'm not simply suggesting that we have a discussion about this process and take the opportunity at our next meeting to broaden that discussion so that we have a discussion about some other process issues, which I'm happy to talk about, but some other process issues about the way this committee runs.
Through the chair, can I suggest that we, if you wish to defer it, that we defer it to the May meeting? The April meeting is a special ARC meeting, which I think the focus is on budget and finance. So if you're going to defer it, perhaps to an ordinary meeting would be better.
So, one of the things I want to put to the committee is that the agenda should be agreed with me in advance of it being sent out. So if that can happen for the May meeting without raising it at the April meeting, then I'm relaxed. But that's just my own view.
Through the chair, the CEO has a delegation for approving the agenda for the art committee. In our regular agenda items in the work plan, we list out what reports are going to come back to the next meeting. So I'm not sure where the ability is of the chair to approve or not approve the reports that are held within an agenda.
Well, can't the chair can presumably seek the consent of the chief executive, can't they?
Can I make a suggestion through the chair? With other committee, I accept the observation and the point you've made, but it would not be uncommon in my experience for there to be some formal consultation prior to the issuing of the notice with the chair of the committee, and I would encourage that if it isn't already happening, which I understand it's not necessary, but certainly would be not uncommon in other without breaching any of the delegations and protocols, etc. But certainly that would be a step in that direction.
So the question that's before us is, if we agree to defer consideration of this item, do we recognise that the April meeting is for a single specific purpose and agree to defer it to May, recognising that that will mean that the ability of the presiding member to have an input in the agenda will then presumably occur for the first time in August?
And so I take on the comments about the survey. It's not an unusual survey in terms of the other, the contents of it pretty similar to others I've done. I was looking at it and thinking this would be an opportunity to put some comments around the very issues that you're addressing and to lay the foundation for that discussion. So the other alternative is that we do the survey and that provides some foundation for the subsequent discussions, because then there'll be an evidence base of 5 people hopefully contributing to that. So that's the other option. But I'm certainly comfortable with it not happening in April. I agree. If we're not doing it today, then
when it's 5 people putting circles around and numbers between 1 and 10, this totally misleading, implies a degree of precision which doesn't exist.
It's more the free text that's helpful.
Well, any statistical, I don't know whether you know this, but there's an association between your level of education and your propensity to circle 0 and 10. The whole thing's completely misleading. I mean, what people do is when I'm sure I do it when I see numbers, I start taking averages, I work out a standard deviation. It's all rubbish. There's 5 people. Anyway, something gets lost in the quantification process in these things. But that's not what's before us. But I think I'm right in saying, that the way I just framed the timing. So if we want to have a discussion about an involvement in the presiding member, because, to be frank, he's totally happy with the agenda. It's more thinking about what's not on the agenda than what is on the agenda. And so I think it's in everybody's interest for there to be some form of consultation about the actual agenda before it gets sent out, because we then get told we can't add items.
Well, through the chair, I think the opportunity is also through the tabling of the work plan report to each meeting, is members reviewing what's coming up at the next meeting, and then if they are wanting to see other information provided, then recommending that back to council through the minutes.
It was not necessarily other information provided. I mean, to take your point about the work plan, is that the timing of when we get budget things and long-term financial plan is an issue. I've got to be direct. There's a bit of a feeling that we get things after all the decisions have been made, so that someone can say we've approved it in the meeting. So there is a need to look at these things. I'm not prosecuting a case. I'm simply mentioning to you the concerns that have been raised with me, which I'm raising myself. So it would seem to me to be in everybody's interest for there to be a closer collaboration over what is not on the agenda.
Through the chair, another suggestion is that through the CEOs that we have an informal gathering of the committee and talk through these issues in detail, and then we can make changes through, changes to the terms of reference or changes to the work plan. So that is something that's open to members as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's just something that, the work plan's got its own straitjacket effect. I'm not sure it's totally captured by that. Not helped by the Local Government Act, which has got to be the area of reform of government. 375 pages. Can you believe it? It's just pathetic. Anyway, I don't have any difficulty with an informal gathering. I thought we were going to have them, but anyway, they have to be held in public. So if we go over to the colonnades, we have to have the recording, and we have to hold it in public. Well, I suppose we can always tell the public we're going to have it, and if they want to turn up, good luck to them. That's fine. Well, what do you think? So let me just try and crystallise it a bit. One suggestion is we simply defer this item to our next meeting and broaden it so that we can talk about these types of issues in the context of the meeting. The second option is to schedule a separate informal gathering with the public invited, where we can kick around how we think that this thing can be made to work better. Goes to performance review, in my judgment. Yeah, there may be another option, but they're the two that seem to me to be on the table right now.
Can I ask, as part of that discussion, are you looking to I suppose, thrash out the meeting procedures of this particular meeting? Because what I was thinking of doing anyway was for the next, on meeting procedures, I was going to raise a nom for the April meeting in relation to the elected member stuff. But at the moment, there's no recording of confidential items within the agenda. So I was going to submit a nom in relation to the fact that we should be considering recording those confidential items. And what I was going to do is, as I was raising the code of practice, I was going to actually then say, on behalf of the ARC, this is another recommendation that we change the meeting procedures in relation to the ARC. But if that's all part of that conversation we'll have in May, that's fine. I'll just do one thing at a time, and I won't sort of try to bundle it all up in one nom. That's fine. Yeah, but just to let you know what I was going to do.
Yeah, no, thank you. But that hits on another point. As I said, if we have this conversation in May, the earliest anything will happen will be August. Well, here we are in March, talking about trying to make something happen in August. That just doesn't work.
Can I just clarify with governance? If there's a consensus with the committee that there is a change to the meeting procedures, whatever they might be, that would have to go through the elected members?
That's correct. And, as the chair points out, the regulations in the Act are very, very constrictive, and there's only a certain amount of wriggle room in there. But I certainly think it's worth us having the discussion around this in an informal setting, because I guess we're having the same questions and the same discussions a lot. So it would actually be really beneficial for staff and for the committee members to have that informal discussion.
Okay.
And if we had the informal meeting, correct me if I'm wrong, it could just be a simple schedule a meeting. We just go into the room that we normally go into, and it becomes open to the public if they choose to attend.
That's correct.
So When I crystallised it before, I didn't get it quite right, did I? We can proceed as is recommended in the papers here. Yeah, we can ask for an agenda item to be scheduled for May, although I'm not quite sure why we can't have it in April. It is a properly constituted meeting of the ARC after all. Or we can have the informal meeting. Yeah. So I'm in the hands of the committee.
I think an informal meeting would be a great idea.
Yeah. All right. So we just need a resolution to that effect. So it'd be that the ARC deferred consideration of this agenda item pending scheduling of an informal meeting to discuss this and other meeting procedures.
And I can email committee members tomorrow, and you can start giving me some dates of when you'll be available, because we can schedule an informal meeting as soon as possible.
That would be good. Yep. Everyone happy with that? Someone need to propose it, or someone need to second it? Councillor Yeomans, thank you. All those in favour?
Should announce it.
Sorry?
Need to announce it.
Oh, carried. 7.8 is the work plan.
Speaking of which,
the dreaded work plan. We've been asked to receive and approve the work plan as attached to agenda item 1. Sorry, yeah, attachment 1. Obviously, time's passed by the first half of it. Well, actually, the first 3/4 of it, really. So I guess we're only dealing with pages 3, 4, and 5. Is there any discussion?
Only an observation that if the meeting in September is moved to the 12th, I'll be in attendance, as I'll be tracking with cameras.
Really?
And if we're out of mobile range.
Maybe. Sorry, anybody?
Just to go to page 141, the meeting location review was scheduled to be part of today's meeting, but that's not on the agenda.
Yep.
through the chair, I think that has been deferred to a later meeting. We haven't updated the detail in this document. And that's, I guess, another discussion that will happen as part of the informal gathering is the location of meetings and recording of meetings.
So does that deal with that? Yep. Anything else? I note at this meeting we're due to deal with the 24-25 budget assumptions. I'm sorry? But there weren't any assumptions in there. I know that's the title, but where were the assumptions?
Through the chair, the report itself highlights all the assumptions.
Yeah. Yeah. Um. Yeah.
That was just another potential typo on page 142. The special meeting refers to the draft 23-24 budget. I'm assuming that should be 24-25.
Can I just ask a question about budget review 3, scheduled for 9 May? What point are we at in the budget process at that point?
Through the chair, when we talk budget reviews, in this case, it's referring to the current period. So really it's a reforecast, if you like, as opposed to next year's budget.
Just seems a funny time to have it, is that we're 1 month away from the end of the financial year. And we're 2 months away from the end of the previous quarter. I suppose it's the only time, is it? Is that the problem?
Through the chair, this will be reporting on the actuals as at the 31st of May, 31st of March. So allowing time for that information to be collated and presented. The 9th of May is, roughly the time that can come to the committee.
Fair enough. Yeah. Yeah. Any other comments? The other one grabbed my attention is FOI applications. I can't remember anything. Maybe this is just an old man's meeting, but I can't remember anything about FOI applications coming to this meeting before.
Through the chair, we include that as part of the corporate governance quarterly report.
Yeah, but do we get a little table about number of applications, number that have been replied to, numbers that are in breach of the Act?
We provide a table of applications that have been were fully released, partially released, refused, or have been withdrawn.
Yeah, but some are also in breach of the Act because we haven't responded in time, right?
That's a deemed refusals. Yeah, we can report on those.
No, that's not the same as a refusal.
Yeah, if the
refusals when you don't respond in time, yes.
Correct. If
it's page 126 of the papers, it's got a reasonable summary of the FOI report.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else? It seems to be, would someone care to move that we receive and approve the work plan? Approving the work plan does prevent things from being added to it, I assume.
That's correct.
Right. Okay. Someone like to move? No, thank you. Happy to approve. Yeah, seconded. All those in favour? Carried. 7.9 is the Audit and Risk Committee actions arising from the previous meeting. This is one of those reports. So let's just deal with it by exception. My suggestion is there any item that anyone wants to raise any queries about? No. Then would someone like to move? Thanks, Paula. Seconded. Thanks, Andrew. All those in favour? Carried. Right. So that brings us to questions on notice, of which there is 0. Motions on notice 0. Petitions notice on motion. Urgent business 0. Confidential items 0. Oh, sorry. Has anyone got any urgent business? No? Okay, confidential items. I don't think we have any, do we? And it gives me great pleasure to declare the meeting closed. Thank you for thanks to the staff for their work, and thanks